Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin. I can't wait for you to hear Dr. Lotte's 2 near-death experiences and how they completely transformed her life by turning on her psychic mediumship and ultimately opening the door for her to go to med school at age 54. She shares mind-blowing details about what she discovered on the other side. And what wowed me even more is the similarity between her NDE and elements of a profound dream I had years before my spiritual awakening. Dr. Lotte Valentin is an author, evidential psychic medium, medical medium, ancestral healer, and creator of Kindraya, a transformational ancestral healing method. She's the author of Med School After Menopause and a faculty member for the Ship Network and Humanities team, where she teaches spirituality and ancestral healing. So we'll begin very shortly, but first I want to invite you to explore everything available for you at karagoodwin.com. You can check out my book, Your Authentic Awakening, and you'll also find a selection of free guided meditations to strengthen your spiritual side. And thank you so much for supporting the show. Your likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions genuinely help this work reach more people. When you engage, you help uplift the frequency of the content, and you make it easier for others to find these conversations. So go ahead and hit that like button or the subscribe button while you're thinking about it. All right, let's begin. Enjoy this episode. Well, welcome, Dr. Lotte. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thanks so much for coming on Soul Elevation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I can't wait for having a discussion with you. It's going to be so much fun.
Yes, I'm excited too. And I want to start with your near-death experiences because these people are so drawn to these stories because they really help us to get a glimpse of what's going on, on the other side. But it also taught you a lot about consciousness and the ancestral field. So what can you share about your experiences?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I was a complete atheist before I had my near-death experience. I was born and raised in Northern Europe in the country of Sweden. And back in the day when I was born, if you were born in the country of Sweden, you were automatically a Lutheran. You belonged to the Lutheran church. And if you didn't want to, you had to tell someone. And, we had to go to the church to get our passport. They counted all the people. So it's this different era. And I think the church and the state didn't separate until like the 1970s. So I was actually confirmed through the Lutheran church when I was 14, like with all my friends. And I did not believe in anything. I was like, that is the stupidest thing, thinking there is a spirit world or, anything that had to do with religion. And I was very, everything was black and white. You die, it's black, you're gone. There is no angels, there is no God, there is no source, there is no, you know, afterlife. So I went into my near-death experiences thinking when you die, it's black and everything is gone. So it literally turned my entire belief system upside down. So my first near-death experience happened in 1992, and it was after I gave birth to my third child, and I was hemorrhaging. I hemorrhaged after birth, and then they, kept me extra time in the hospital, sent me home, and then after 10 days, I hemorrhaged this huge clot. Went to the ER. They did an examination, said, well, it could be a second lining that came out. Sent me home, no test, no ultrasound. This is 1992, and hemorrhaged again the next day. And we called the hospital, and it was decided to see the doctor the next morning. So I went to see the doctor again, manual inspection. Could have been a second lining that came out. Send me on my way. Again, hemorrhage that afternoon, went back to the ER. And again, a manual inspection. They said, well, it looks fine. It's just a trickle of blood right now. So nobody really understood the amount of blood I was hemorrhaging each time, which was, the size of a man's large fist or a newborn baby's head. I mean, it was a massive amount of blood. So they leave me in this hospital room in the ER, close the door. And as I'm lying on this bed, I start bleeding again. And I'm thinking, oh, at least I'm bleeding right while I'm in the ER, not understanding the seriousness of it because everybody had to send me on my way, and I'm 34 years old. How am I supposed to know, you know, how much blood you're supposed to lose? So I'm bleeding, lying on this table, and there's a nurse that comes and checks on me. And I mean, this is the divine intervention. It's like the angel sent her, check on her right now. I'm sure something pinged her. And she opens the door, and I just see this face of terror on the look on her face, like she's like, oh, with her jaw literally hitting the ground. And I can hear her making the call on the loudspeaker. OBGYN, stat to the ER. OBGYN, stat to the ER. And she quickly cleans up the mess, puts clean papers down, and literally this middle-aged doctor runs into my room full speed with younger physician in tow. He asks me, how much have you been bleeding? I tell him I've hemorrhaged, for 2 days now. And he says, all right, let's take a quick look. And as they're looking and doing a manual inspection again, another huge blood clot comes out.
Oh my
So
gosh.
at this point, I, I'm like passing out now. So I'm trying to tell him, I don't feel too good. And he knows, because he knows how much I've been bleeding. So he knows right away the seriousness of the situation. And he just pushes me down at the table, and my eyes can't even be open now. So I just hear all the people coming into the room. And I have a nurse on my right quoting my blood pressure, and a nurse on my left trying to place an IV. And as I'm lying there, I feel like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. It's like free fall. And it's probably my blood pressure that's just crashing. I just feel like I'm falling. And the nurse on my right yells out, 50 over 15, hurry. That's my blood pressure. So I am still crashing after she says that. But it was shortly after she yelled that in a very panicked voice, which years later I would wake up with nightmares hearing this nurse yelling that out, because it was at that point I knew that I was dying. So it's a very different feeling from like you're driving on the highway and somebody cuts you off and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna die. Somebody, like, you could be in an accident. This is it. This feeling, I knew I was dying. And so here I'm lying on this table, not believing in anything. So what do? I say, well, if anything was true that they taught me when I was 14, it's my only hope now because I know I'm dying. So I said, if there's a God out there, please let me live. I have 3 children under the age of 6. I had a 6-year-old boy, 3.5-year-old boy, and a newborn baby girl. And shortly after that, I just got pulled out of my body. So now I'm just hovering, I'm going to say about 3 feet above my body. But in this state, right, the first thing that comes to me is, how can I be outside my body and still be me? This is not supposed to happen, right? So the interesting part is that you're still there, okay? The way you experience yourself in your body right now, if you leave your body and you have a near-death experience right now, you're still you. You're just outside your body. It's not any different from you drive to the grocery store in your car, you park your car, you get out of your car, you're still you. You're not something different because you were in the car or you're outside your car. But that's your car. You belong to that car. You get back in the car, right? It's that kind of a feeling. So you just step out of your body. You're still there without the body. But in this state, there was this, it's just number one, it's just peace, unconditional love. And you're not even thinking about, that you need to get back. It's more, wow, this is so peaceful here. And all those fears that I had right before I got pulled out of my body weren't there anymore. It wasn't like, oh, I have to get back. No, it's, wow, what's this state? So it's a very different feeling. You don't have those concerns anymore, right? It's just like, wow, this is amazing. It's unconditional love. But there was no time in this space. So I had this knowledge that I could access past, present, and future all at the same time, and time didn't matter. Time is just something we experience here in this physical body on Earth because of our physical experiences here, and there is no time when you leave the body. So it drove me crazy for a year. I searched the San Francisco Public Library, floor to ceiling. I read books, physics books that I could barely understand the math, trying to figure out, like, how can it be that there's no time on the other side? So anyway, so then I get pulled back into my body. And then the next morning, as I'm lying in that hospital bed in the room, my sister-in-law had just passed away about 2 weeks earlier. And I know she's in the left corner of my ceiling, and I can hear her. And she says, everything's going to be okay. And I'm thinking, what is happening to me? Yesterday, I left my body. I'm outside my body. That's not supposed to happen. Was not part of my belief system. And now I think I'm hearing my sister-in-law, right? So I was petrified of sharing my story with anybody, and they sent me a nurse. So that was from Norway, so they probably thought I'd really bond with her and tell her what happened, because obviously I think she was very, very aware of near-death experiences. I had never heard of such a thing. I had no belief system, no spirituality, and so she asked me. She said, "Did anything unusual happen yesterday in the ER?" And I said, "No, no, nothing unusual at all. Just here," because I was so afraid of saying anything because I figured they're going to think I'm crazy and they're going to lock me up in the psych ward. And who knows what if I'm ever going to see my children again because they're going to think I'm a lunatic. So I was, and I think a lot of people, we're still that way. And I'm so thankful for YouTube and podcasts where we all get to share our experience because, think about how many people are revived and how many of those people are going to have a near death experience because the medical profession is absolutely not aware of it. And I went to a naturopathic medical school and they were not aware of it either. So,
Really?
no. And I
Wow.
spoke with my counselor and she had never heard of it. And so, there is no education of medical doctors. So if somebody, it's very common in today's world when we revive people. So I think it's really important for people to understand that this is something that can happen. It's a spiritual experience. We are all spiritual creatures. So then the second one was very different. I'll tell you the second one before I'll let you ask questions so we get the
Yeah.
whole picture.
Perfect.
And then I was really sick, and there's a long story about that. But I have something called bone marrow suppression. So my bone marrow sort of shut down. I wasn't making enough blood. So 2 years later, as I'm struggling to heal from this, I have a second near-death experience, and I get pulled out of my body. And this, I kind of laugh at it now because if I had the full effect the first time, I don't know, I would probably have checked myself into the psych ward, because I wasn't ready to have that experience. Because the second one, it's almost like I had to build up to it. So the second one experience is so different, and it's really what activated my life path even more so than the first experience. So in the second experience, I get pulled out of my body, I tumble through darkness, think Star Wars, flying in a spaceship. It's just darkness. And I get to this place that I call the mid station because it is as if you walk into a skyscraper that has 100 floors and you push the elevator button on the 50th floor. You get off on the 50th floor, you know that there's floors above you, you know there's floors below you, right? You don't know what's on those floors because you're on the 50th floor. So it's that kind of an awareness, as if, I don't know, you get to a certain place to have a certain experience. I don't know. I call it the bouncing station because I didn't have a choice to stay. They said, no, you have to go back. Sometimes you hear people saying they had a choice. I didn't get a choice. And so I get to this station and I hear the most beautiful music. Music you cannot make here on Earth because I sat at this synthesizer for a week trying to find any sound that was as beautiful as this music. It's like we can't quite recreate that sound in this earth plane. So I'm wondering where this beautiful music is coming from. So I look to my right and I see a little cabin. And I also think it's funny what we see.
Yeah.
Is that something that's comforting for me? Because it looked like a little Swedish sauna, like a little log cabin. I open the door, look inside, and it's empty. So I'm like, wow, there's nothing there. I look to my left, and it's literally a mirror image of the cabin on the right. And I open the door, look inside, but it's empty. But then it's like there is this very bright white light, the brightest, whitest light you could imagine. And it's just pure unconditional love. And it's almost like if you've ever been in a really dense fog and it just kind of rolls in and surrounds you and you're just enveloped by the fog, it was like that, but it was the light. So I'm just enveloped by this pure unconditional love, like you would never want to leave. It's just like bliss. You're in a state of bliss in this light. And as I'm turning around into the light, I see an outline of, like the silhouette, an outline of angels in the light. And the music is coming from the angels. But I also have an awareness that I don't believe in angels, but here I'm seeing angels, and this music is coming from the angels. And the light itself, I call it source, because if I say it's God or if I say it's something else, I kind of lock myself into a religion. And I think that religions, to some extent, are created for different parts of the world. After all, there were people that decided what gets printed in the Bible, what gets included in the Bible, what does not get included in the Bible. We used to worship goddesses, okay? That's not in the Bible. So there is a lot of things because it also came along with the patriarchal society. And we have to kind of take a step back and say, hey, what can we use in our modern world today? So the light, right? You can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. I call it source. So it's this light that we come from. We're part of this light. It's the creator. It's we are part of the light. We come from the light. We carry the light within us, right? We say you're a light in this world. We are, right? If you're a spiritual being, we say, oh, we're light workers. Why do we say that? Where does that come from? Right? I'm going to say all the people thousands of years ago that also had near-death experiences, because the times I have read and gone back to reading, different religious texts, I say, wow, whoever, like this person who wrote that must have had a near-death experience because this is what they're saying here, right? But if you haven't had that, sometimes I think we misinterpret things that are printed too, because they're trying to explain a concept to us. So as I'm standing in this light, I there's two spirit guides, one on my right, one on my left, and the spirit guide on the right says to the other one, "What is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back." And I'm going to say, you can only be outside your body for a certain amount of time or something. And the spirit guide, and I'm like, no, wait a second. Like, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? I spent 2 years pondering this already, right? And I'm like, I want to know, how does this work? And the spirit guide on my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. It's like, and I've heard other people say they have like a wiping mechanism or like they wipe out your memory. And if that makes sense, to me, it was just like, you're not going to remember, but you will remember this. And then it was like I was standing on the moon, looking down on the planet Earth. But around the Earth was what I call, because this is 1994, the silvery, glittery fishnet. Because fishnets have a diamond shape. We didn't have Google yet. And again, I searched the San Francisco Public Library for what is this grid? Could never find anything, and eventually I gave up. Now we can just Google grid around the Earth, and this beautiful picture comes up and shows us the grid, right? But this was 1994, and growing up in Sweden, I spent my summers in the archipelago when it was like 24,000 islands, and there was no running water, no electricity, no phone on the island. It was you survived. We laid fishnets in the ocean. And so I'm rowing this little boat for my grandmother. I'm like 6, 7 years old with my big life vest on. And she, lays all these fishnets in the ocean. But when she lifts the fishnets out of the ocean in that early morning sun, the fishnet is diamond shaped, right? And it's got little water droplets on it. So it sort of glitters in the morning sunlight. So to me, it looked like a fishnet. So the silvery, glittery fishnet around the earth. And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that, I got sent back. And it literally has activated my life path. And there's many stories that how did I end up going to med school when I'm 54, etc. But that is literally my work today and ancestral healing, having that deep understanding of the interconnectedness of not only our physical beings, but also our mental beings and our individual struggles that we have are connected to each other and through the ancestral field.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm like dying to tell you, like as you were talking about your experience with the two guides, and they said, no matter what I tell you, you won't remember. I immediately remembered this dream that I had probably, let's see, maybe 15, 16 years ago, something like that. Um, and it was just a regular dream. This was not a near death experience, but I was not spiritually awakened at this
Mhm.
time. I was mainstream,
Yeah.
through and through. And so I had this dream. I woke up from this dream, and what all I could remember first of all was that I was on a different planet. And I don't know if it was the moon, but I remember I was on a different planet. And as I was thinking about this dream, I was like, oh my God, this reminds me of the dream where I was on the other planet. And
Mhm.
then you're like, and then I was on the moon. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe it was the moon I was on. I don't know. But it was like it wasn't like a busy planet with a lot of
Mhm.
landscape or whatever. It was like I just was on like a sphere, like a
Mhm.
desolate, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like there wasn't destruction. It was just kind of like a place, like I was on a circle almost.
Yeah.
And I was with a guide, and I felt that this guide was male, and they took me through everything. They told me how everything worked, and it all made so much sense. It was like click, 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 and it was like this is related to that and that and that, and this is how this fits in. And it wasn't like I was learning it linearly. It was really more of a remembrance, but it was like all these things that are connected, and it was so obvious. It was just like
Mhm.
this is just how things are, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And then it was like, and you won't remember this when you wake up. And I was like, what? And then I woke up, and I was like, and all I could remember was being on that sphere or being on that planet. And I remembered that I knew everything and that it was gone in a flash. And I was like, how did I forget that already? And so I'm just kind of blown away that you had such a
Mhm.
similar experience with that,
Mhm.
because that was so unique for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love when we have those experiences and then we only get to remember a certain piece of it. It's almost like the spirit world's like, well, you're not ready to remember all of it. We're just going to give you this piece right now, or it's not time for you to remember it yet, right? And then because sometimes, time goes by and all of a sudden it's like something pops into your head, right? And it's like, wait a
Yeah.
second, I already had this. But I feel like we're so much more guided than we think we are, right? It's like when
Yes.
you're going through a difficult time and you're looking for guidance and you ask the spirit world, okay, I need guidance on this. And they're just dead silent. They're like,
Yeah.
no, like you're not going to get any guidance on this. This is for you to figure out. Now I know, after, 35 years of meditating, but it's when we ask for guidance and we're not getting anything because we're supposed to have this experience, right? Going through life. And so the way I look at it, when we can get guidance, we will get guidance. So it never hurts to ask for guidance or meditate and try to get guidance. But when we don't get an answer, because many times when I work with people, they'll say, I think the spirit world has given up on me because I haven't heard anything for 2 years, right? And I'm like, no, they're just waiting for the right moment. Like you have to go through a certain, experiences in this life before you're ready for that next phase. So I
Yeah.
feel like, we hit a plateau and then we can stay there. It could be a week or it could be 5 years, right? And we're now just supposed to have an experience and make our own decisions. And then maybe all of a sudden, again, we get a lot of, downloads. So it's very different for different people. So, like when
Yeah.
after my near death experiences, it was this constant because I didn't believe in anything. So I thought all the premonitions, it was just like a deja vu, it was just a coincidence. And then, after years of this happening, I started writing it down. I was like, it can't be a coincidence. I mean, how many times, do I have to have these experiences? And I would start writing things down, like literally pen and paper and say, this was my dream, or this is what it just came to me. I got a flash or an image, I saw something, and then realize, I would go back and go, yep, I really did see it. I wrote it down yesterday, right? But I think many times, a lot of people have these experiences or they think they discount it just like I did because depending on how we were raised, our belief system, it's very easy to say it's a coincidence or discount it as a deja vu.
Yes, absolutely. And, one more thing before we move on with the dream, the synchronicity between
Mhm.
our two experiences, my dream and your near-death experience. You talked a lot about time,
Mhm.
and that was a big part. Like, how can I be outside my body? How
Mhm.
can I understand that time doesn't exist here? I remember the one thing that I could take back with me from that dream, aside from just remembering being on this planet or whatever
Mhm.
with my guide, was the words space time continuum. And
Mhm.
this was a long time ago. And that I hear that now because of the
Mhm.
work that I do and just the stuff that I'm interested in.
Mhm.
But I was not into sci-fi at the time. I
Yeah.
was not into quantum. I didn't
Mhm.
even know what the quantum was until many, many
Mhm.
years later. Never drawn to any like science fiction types of things. So
Mhm.
I'm sure I had heard at some point like the
Yeah.
words space-time continuum, but not with under any understanding of what it
Mhm.
was. And I remember kind of being disoriented the next morning and being
Mhm.
like, space time continuum. Space time continuum. What is space
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
continuum? Why would I be
Yeah.
dreaming that? Like, why would that be part of my
Mhm.
dream? So it's just very like there's so much synchronicity and synergy
Mhm.
here that I'm tuning into. So that's so fascinating.
Mhm.
Now, with what you shared,
Mhm.
you talked a lot about you talked a little bit about the fishnet around the planet and
Mhm.
that kind of grid.
Mhm.
I know you do a lot of work with the ancestral
Mhm.
field. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to know about how you help people to engage with their ancestral field. Maybe start with what the ancestral field is. And
Mhm.
then, just as a side thing, it is fascinating to me knowing that you have this connection with the ancestral field,
Mhm.
and then your two near death experiences were related to blood. And of
Mhm.
course, our blood is so connected with our blood
Yeah.
lines
Mhm.
and our ancestors. So I
Mhm.
don't know if you make anything of that too, but for me, I'm like, whoa, that's not nothing.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's start with what is the ancestral field?
Yeah. So the ancestral field, everything like where you were saying, everything is physics in the end. So I'm going to start with, how does it work? How are we connected? Well, we're connected via the DNA, right? The bloodline, as we say, right? And we know from, if we look at the science part of it, we know that traumatic events are passed down through the generations. They've done research on Holocaust survivors, and they can see that, they identified, I think the first gene that they identified was the FKBP5 gene, and there are some other genes that have been identified, and they can see the changes all the way down to the grandchildren. And I'm sure the research will continue. So when we have traumatic experiences in our lives and our ancestors have traumatic experiences, that is going to change how they code, right? That's going to change their epigenetics. So think of it, the DNA is like your computer hard drive. It doesn't work unless you have a software that runs it. That's your epigenetics, right? But when you have different experiences, that epigenetics is going to code for something different. Just like your software on your computer when you ask it to do certain things, so you want it this font or that font. You're telling it what to do, right? So when you look at it, we're kind of similar that way. So we know that things get passed down, traumatic experiences get passed down on the DNA. So what happened to your grandparents that fought in the war, right? We're still dealing with the grandparents or great grandparents that were in World War II, etc., or other, people that have slaves in their history, things like that. Even if either the parents or the grandparents might have been slaves, or you're a descendant of the slave owner. Guess what? You're entangled with all of that. So we're entangled with all our family members via, the bloodline and DNA, but we're also entangled with people. So people who are, let's say, the grandchildren of the slave owner, they're entangled with the slaves now because the slave owner all the slaves worked for them. So you're entangled with that. So when you're looking at physics, the people who received the Nobel Prize for Physics 2 years ago, there were three physicists. And what they proved is that when you have two pair of two particles. So let's say the particles are apples. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So let's say that Kara has 2 apples at her house, and I have 2 apples at my house. We're really good at throwing these apples. So we're both going to throw these apples to the Empire State Building in New York City. And both our apples land right next to each other at the entrance of the Empire State Building. Well, your apple now met my apple, right? So they're now entangled. But the apple that I still have at my house, the other apple, and your other apple at your house, are now also entangled because they knew the apple that we both threw to New York. So the apples that we still have at our house are now entangled. Well, when you work with ancestral healing, it's just like that. So, the physics is still catching up to what you see when you work as a healer and you work spiritually with people. Because we've seen this, right? People have seen this for a long time. How things are connected through spirituality or spiritual knowledge. So when you look at the ancestral field, right, that is the ancestral field. All the connections that we have to our ancestors, to their friends, we're all entangled in all of it. Now, when you work with people, when we take a problem, like an everyday kind of problem, right, it looks very simple. Something that is very common is that the women in our society are still carrying the mental load. They're the ones that have to remember what food to get into the house, what we're going to cook, if you have kids, what the kids' homework is, and some science project is due. Somebody needs to be picked up. Somebody's got to go to the doctor. And for most families, I'm going to say, because it's a lot about that on social media today, right? The women are still carrying most of that mental load, and the men are slowly coming along. So when we look at that, we say, why is it that I had to unload the dishwasher 5 times and also put 2 loads of laundry in? And my partner, he's very helpful, but I always have to tell him what to do. Hey, honey, can you please unload the dishwasher? Hey, honey, can you please take the garbage out? Right? More mental load for the woman because she's now also managing her partner. So her wish then is, why can't he just do this on his own, right? But then we look, so this is a very simple problem, but then we look at, where did you come from? Now look at your mom. What was your mom's role in the family? Are you repeating a pattern? This is like common, so it's a hidden alignment. You're repeating a pattern of an ancestor, in this case, your mom. So your mom was a homemaker. She took care of everything in the house, and you as a child are, you're learning that pattern, but you're also tuning into that pattern. But then what happens if you have something that you don't like? So let's say, so now we can see we're repeating a pattern that mom did, and we have to untangle that pattern. But let's say the father in the family was an alcoholic, and he always got drunk on Fridays and Saturday nights, and he was very obnoxious, and he would always yell at the kids and his wife, right? And so let's say you're the young woman growing up in this family, and you say to yourself, I am never going to date anybody or marry somebody like my father. I reject him. I hate this behavior, right? And guess what happens in many times? Whenever you reject something, something is still unresolved in that ancestral field. And so it's going to come back. And so many times, it doesn't have to be this way, but if you pulled that ticket, if you said, I'm going to heal this, you have that ticket, you're going to meet somebody that is also going to be an alcoholic and be obnoxious on Friday and Saturday night. Because when you reject things, they come back. So when you think of the ancestral field, it's energy. Everything is energy. We all know that, right? It's the energy that still resides in the field. So it's the energy of, what your mom thought. If your mom didn't have, let's say your mom had a high school education and you went to college, you became a successful lawyer, you can't put your diploma on the wall because you feel like an imposter. People are going to figure out, I'm really not that good. You have imposter syndrome, even though you're a very successful lawyer, right? Because in that you have an alignment with mom, because as a child, you love your parent unconditionally, subconsciously, whether they're nice or not, because you're dependent on them. And those patterns come back and repeat. But we're also, we're very loyal. I'm going to say loyal to the parents. And so if the mom didn't have a higher degree, and you might have been the first one going to college, you have a higher degree, it's your first one in the family, but you have imposter syndrome, you feel bad about it because you surpassed the lineage. You have a higher, so it's just a matter of recognizing it and awaken that and create healing for that and saying, wait a second, I feel like an imposter because I'm supposed to be in line behind my mom. I'm supposed to be the little duckling following my mom. My mom, is the person I look up to, and I don't surpass her. I don't speak bad to her. I am following in line. And it is human nature that we all want to belong, right? And so we give up. We give up speaking up, being heard, because if the lineage valued productivity more than being seen and heard emotionally, that's what's going to get passed down. So see how you get things on the DNA that you might not even know what happened to those people. And you're also conditioned by the way you're being raised. And when you're an infant, you can't regulate your nervous system yourself because you co-regulate with a caretaker, right? And those are infants. Anybody who has children knows that it's impossible to put a child to sleep if you're stressed, right? You have to pretend you're all the 29 things that's still on your to-do list after you put this baby down doesn't exist, because the calmer you are, the more quickly that child is going to go to sleep. So they co-regulate and they're completely dependent on you. So when we, go through life, we can see that we get things on the DNA, we get things from the nervous system, the way our parents interacted with us, the household we grew up in, the way we were conditioned to believe things. But then we also have that ancestral field. So there are times when I work with people that don't even remember, they don't even know anything. They might have been adopted, or the mom left the father before the baby was even born because he was abusive or he was an alcoholic, whatever. Or you might have had wonderful parents. I love working with those people that say, it was like Leave It to Beaver family. And I'm like, I already know what you're struggling with because the way we're raised and our nervous system tunes into that, and it's all subconscious. So even when we think that everything was great, if we have a mom or a parent or relatives, and we already know it's a problem because they couldn't see you, they couldn't love you, they were, not nice people, that you didn't think that they were nice to you, right? We already know that we have a problem, but sometimes people have struggled with things and they don't connect it to their parents or their upbringing or their relatives because they were nice, and they see it as, well, my parents were perfect, there was nothing wrong with them, right? But then the issue is actually still stemming from that because they're just more hidden and it's just harder to see it. So I developed something called, I studied ancestral healing under Mark Wallin, which is a form of counseling, and then, a million classes in med school. And then, but then because I'm a medium, right, and I work with the spirit world, I integrated all of that and I developed what's called Kindraya. And so it has the cognitive portion when we can use our mind and say, my mom was an alcoholic or my mom was abusive in some way. We already know there's an issue, right? But sometimes we don't know that. And then all this lives in our body. So we need that somatic awareness. And then when we don't know anything about our past ancestors, we use our superconscious awareness. So we use our clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance. If we close our eyes, and I've worked with clients where both of us see the same thing at the same time, which is just fascinating, right? It's like we're all tuning in, and I've done this many times with people. We tune in and we see the same thing, or sometimes we get two different pieces, but they fit together, right? So it's very interesting because we are all intuitive creatures. It's just a matter of using that ability. But once we put all of that together, our cognitive awareness, our somatic awareness, where does it live in the body, and what do I tune into in the field itself when I use my intuitive abilities? And it's just amazing what people can heal once you put it all together, right? So I've had people that lost communication with their mom, their child, and then we do a healing and they say, I haven't spoken to my mom for 10 years. We do a healing, an ancestral healing session. And then, 6 months later, they come back and say, oh, I want to work on this now. And I say, I know, how did it go with your mom? Oh, we're best friends now. We talk every day. And I've had, and other people saying, I lost communication with my daughter. I can see that I've heard you on the podcast. I can see she's repeating a pattern. When she was little, she was just a toddler, but I can see she's with a partner that was very much like my partner at the time. And I've lost communication. They are being managed by that partner. And And then we do an ancestral healing. And then 2 weeks later, I get an email saying, guess who called? My daughter. Right? And they have no awareness that you're doing something. I'm going to say these are the apples we threw to New York City. It's like we're all connected because when we create healing, so for people who are struggling out there, don't think, how do I fix that person? Just think, what can I do to heal myself? Because when you heal yourself, your frequency changes, and your frequency is connected to everybody you know and everything that's out there, every thought, every action, every reaction. It all counts because everything is just vibrational frequencies in the end. And so by everybody creating healing for themselves, they're literally creating healing for the world.
That is so beautiful. I love that. Now, you mentioned a couple of times that when people come to you and they're like, it's not my mom, it's not my parents, they were great. And you say, I already know what's wrong.
Yeah.
But can you
Yeah.
can you pull that thread a little bit? So what is
Yeah.
it that you habitually see when people feel that they have, great parents?
Yeah. I'm going to say the most common issue I see with those people is, oh, we were leaving to be with family, and we were happy. I had a happy childhood. Everything was great. I said, okay, and what should we work on today? Well, so I've been married for 20 years and blah blah blah, but it's like my partner is like, he doesn't see me, like I'm doing everything in the house, like he doesn't notice me, he doesn't pay attention to me. So you have that disconnect where, and it's typically the woman, right? I do work with men too, but it's most often the women that feel like they're not being seen and heard or valued in the relationship. So then you say, well, tell me about your parents. Well, mom was really loving and nurturing, and I said, yeah. And what was the relationship between your mom and dad? Dad was very nice. He provided for the family. He brought home the paycheck. He would help out. He mowed the lawn, and he would, fix things around the house. And, was your mom seen and heard by your dad? Well, they were happy, but my mom did everything as also just like you're doing everything, right? So you see the pattern repeating, and it's that unconditional love that we have for the parents. And when we are raised that way, I said, so, sometimes you also know by the age, okay, you were born in the 50s, you were born in the 60s, the world was at a different place, right? Versus people who are born in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We all have our generational um, issues that we work on. So when during that era too, people who are, I'm going to say even people who are born in the 80s, they're because they were raised by the people that were born in the 50s and 60s. So that the pattern just keeps passed down, right? Where we're taught not to speak back to mom and dad. You don't raise your voice. You do what you're told. Um, if you help out and do the dishes, clean your room, help set the table, whatever it is, you're a good little girl, right? And you get a pat on the back, and you earn your love that way. And so you do all the things your parent taught you to do, and then you're very loved. You feel very good because mom says you did a good job, right? Now that just basically carries right over into your relationship. You're doing the exact same thing. You have the same relationship with your partner that you had with your mother. So you're just repeating because when you set the table and you did the dishes and you cleaned your room when you were little, mom said, good job, honey, good job. Like, you got a pat on the back. But now you're doing all those things that earned you the love because you earned it. You're not getting the same response because you're dealing with a partner now, right?
Mm.
And so you're not getting, so it's like a disconnect, but we often don't see it because we're thinking, well, I'm doing all the right things, so why don't I feel loved and supported? Well, because that good job little girl is not there anymore. So I'm going to say that is the most common thing I see, and once people see it, they're like, wow, I never even thought of that, because we're so programmed to
Hmm.
do what we taught how to do things or how to deal with things as a child. It's the
Yeah.
subconscious. I mean, our subconscious mind is what rules us, right? The
Yes.
conscious mind is like, you see the pictures on social media, the tip of the iceberg above the
Right.
water, and then the
Yeah.
whole iceberg is underwater. I mean, that is your subconscious mind, right? That's what rules us. And it's very hard to sometimes see where your own issues are coming from. It's very easy to see other people's issues, like, oh, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? But then looking at
Yes.
yourself is the hardest.
Oh, yeah, totally. So let's talk about intergenerational inheritance of behavior patterns. And you've talked, I mean, we've talked more or less about this, but there's some interesting research that
Mhm.
you might be able to share here.
Yeah, there's some really interesting research. I'm going to say the best study was done back in 2013, and it was intergenerational odor fear conditioning. It was a study that was done on mice, and it was published in Nature Neuroscience back in 2013. It was a study that was led by Emory University School of Medicine by Brian Diaz. And what they did is they took male mice and exposed them to a cherry blossom smell. Every time the male mice smelled the cherry blossom, they got a little electric shock. So, of course, the male mice learned to be scared of the cherry blossom smell because they're like, here comes the shock, right? The electric shock. So they were scared of the cherry blossom smell. Well, then they took the sperm of the male mice, put it in the female mice, artificially inseminated the female mice with the sperm from these mice that had had that electric shock. They never got to meet, so they didn't get to tell each other. Okay, I just took the sperm, put it in the female mice. Well, she gave birth to these little baby mice, and the baby mice were very, jumpy and afraid of this cherry blossom smell, even though the baby mice had never received an electric shock. They were still fearful, right? They showed that behavior. And not only that, the receptor that smells the cherry blossom was an M71 receptor. Not that anybody will remember that, but the receptor, the smell receptor, the odor receptor itself, the baby mice had more M71 receptors so that they could detect the smell at even lower levels, right? So it
Wow.
shows like in that one generation, without them having been exposed to it, that fear was there. Now think of your grandparents, think of the whole people that survived the Holocaust, or think of the great grandparents that served in the war. So when you have people, let's say the grandfather survived World War II, and every time the sirens went off to warn people, here comes the airplanes that are going to bomb us, right? Everybody runs to shelter. And this grandfather, he thought every time the sirens went off, he said, this is it. This is the day I die, right? He's going to code that in his body. He's going to tell his offspring, watch out for the sirens. Those, they could mean you're going to die, right? Think of the mice. So, he's going to be, afraid of that siren. So when you get somebody, further down the line, now a grandchild is born, and this grandchild, I'm just making this example up based on, like, to kind of correlate it to the mice story, right? So here is somebody who is afraid of sirens. But this grandchild was never in an accident, hasn't been in a fire, has never, been in a situation or traumatic event themselves where there were sirens, right? They're just panic or have a lot of anxiety when they hear sirens. They're very afraid of it. Well, where is it coming from then, right? If it's not our own experience, if we had an experience, you were in a car accident, there were sirens, and, it was scary, you had your own traumatic experience. We know where it's coming from. But sometimes we have patterns or anxiety or behaviors that we don't understand where they're coming from. We're like, where is that coming from? Why is it? Why is it that one of my kids is petrified of, the train, the noise of the train? And there's nobody that is afraid of the train in the house. We've never been close to the train, but every time they hear the train, they cry, they scream, right? Where is that coming from, right? Those are the things that, it's kind of the unresolved puzzle pieces of life that sometimes we just don't know how to figure it out. I'm going to say, let's take a look at the ancestors. Now, we might not know an ancestor that, had was hit by the train or had something bad happen. That's when we use our superconscious abilities and we go into the ancestral field and we say, all right, can somebody show us something? See what comes. Because we are all intuitive. We are all born mediums, right? To a certain extent. Some people are supposed to be working with it, like me, I'm a professional medium, but other people are mediums just for themselves, right? So sometimes people we lose loved ones and they say, I saw my grandmother, I saw my dad, right? Or I smelled my mom's perfume, right? We all have that ability, but it doesn't mean we're going to work with it. It's like saying, we can all sing happy birthday. It doesn't mean we're going to be Taylor Swift tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, but we all have that capacity.
Right. Well, and it's fascinating when you think about the ancestral line as well, where in order for us to get here today in 2026, or in the future when
Mhm.
somebody's listening to this, wherever you are in time, um, every one of our ancestors had to survive long enough to reproduce. And
Mhm.
that's, a long time for a human. That means that every single person in our ancestry, going back
Mhm.
generations, made it to at least reproductive age.
Mhm.
And that means that our bloodline, our DNA goes back through history, every single person. So we may not know, I mean, you've talked about this where it's like we may not know who our
Mhm.
grandparents were or
Mhm.
what they went through. We may not even know who our parents were and what they went through. But every
Mhm.
single person listening to this has a lineage
Mhm.
that they don't understand what their ancestors went through
Mhm.
to some extent.
Mhm.
And that'd be the majority of your ancestry,
Yeah.
And but there have been, and this planet has been plagued by
Mhm.
wars and famines
Mhm.
and diseases and, people
Mhm.
crossing great barriers through distance in order to get
Mhm.
to safety, and all of these things that lead to trauma.
Mhm.
And then they were raising children along with
Mhm.
that. So all of the foibles and the traumas and the
Mhm.
ways that people were just trying to survive, and that just keeps getting carried generation after generation. It
Mhm.
lands in our DNA, it lands in our blood, it
Mhm.
lands in our quantum energy field. And
Mhm.
so it really can just blow the mind when we think
Mhm.
about the scope and breadth of the shoulders that we're standing on, from a
Yeah.
generational perspective.
Yes.
So your story is fascinating too,
Mhm.
because you were guided to go to medical school at age
Mhm.
54. And I'd
Mhm.
love to know how that came about.
So it is a funny story. So for 12 years, right, after my first near-death experience, it was just this constant, premonition, seeing the future, and so many different events. And after 12 years of this and writing things down, when the spirit world comes forward and says something, at this point, it took me 12 years, and I kind of laugh at how slow that, progression is. But we know that it takes 2 to 3 decades for somebody who has had a near-death experience to actually fully integrate it. So it's a long process. So, but we always think that, tomorrow is everything's going to be fine, but it took me 12 years to really truly start trusting in the spirit world, because for 12 years I had taken notes. I knew that whatever came through is the truth. So after, 12 years, I said, all right, this is it. Like, I finally healed. Like, I'm finally well. My watch ticked for 12 months because I had problems with watches and a lot of things that happen to people that have near-death experiences. To get electrical interference. So my watches were all dying. After 1 year, they ticked for a month. After 2 years, 2 months. I used to have 16, 17 watches in my drawer to see if one would start working again. So after 12 years, my watch ticked for 12 months. I was finally like over the bone marrow suppression. I was feeling well. And it's the funny part is all in my astrological chart too. So I've learned this over the last few years. Oh, I can see that this year. So anyway, I was looking on the computer and said, I need to go back to work. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a doctor. I knew I was a healer. My father was a physician. And I didn't go that line. I married an American. I moved to the United States instead and majored in business and computer science. So here I am, and I'm like, I cannot go back to work in tech. I have to, change tracks and educate myself and work as a healer. So I look on the computer and I find something that says naturopathic medical school. And I said, wow, this is amazing. It's like you integrate, Western and Eastern medicine and put it all together. And then I realized it was a real medical school. So then I said, oh, I'm in my 40s now. I can't go to medical school. I don't have any of the classes. I have to take biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and math, and all the classes I didn't have. And even if I do all that and I pass those classes, there is no guarantee they're even going to accept me. I'm going to be so much older, right, than all the other students. So I just closed my computer, a little bit frustrated, walked to the kitchen. I'm like, I'll just look tomorrow. I'll find something else. And as I get to my kitchen, the spirit world drops in and they say, you have, oh, well, they say you have to, right? We still have a choice. We have free will. But the message came across as you have to go to medical school. You have to be a naturopathic physician. You are to give people, messages and healing. And you're to combine East and West, which I took as kind of old and new because naturopathic medicine is kind of old and new medicine put together. And you are to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And that message, I was like, write what? So I've gotten that message from 4 professional mediums, 2 in the United States and 2 in England when I studied mediumship at Arthur Findlay College. And it was always my mom and coming through, and the message was always exactly the same. You are to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And it's always the same message. It's fascinating. So it's like
Wow,
I'm
that
getting
is
confirmation.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So then I was enrolled. I went to Diablo Community College in East Bay, San Francisco, because that's where we were living at a time. And this community college is bigger than a lot of universities. It has, I don't know, like 25 or 30,000 students. It's huge. Um, Anyway, so I enrolled. I was literally in school like 2 weeks later, and I didn't even have high school biology. So my first class, I had to take advanced placement high school biology so I could get into freshman biology because I went to, the last time I had science was, in Sweden, it's like junior high because we major in high school. So if you're going to be a physician or a nurse, you go the science line in high school and you do all those prereqs that you do at the university here. We do those in high school, and then you go straight from high school into nursing or medical school. So, but back in the day when I went to school, I was like, oh, there's only like 2 girls that are going to do the science line. I'm not going to have any friends. And you're 14 years old or 15 years old, and you're thinking, it's much more important to have friends or have a boyfriend and all those things. So I ended up majoring in languages and business in high school. So they told me I had to go to med school. And then when I was 54, I applied to 2 schools. I was accepted to both of them. And I went to med school.
Wow.
So it's never too late, right? And then I wrote a book about it, Med School After Menopause, because I was already in menopause when I went to med school.
Wow.
And the book is really, there's one chapter about like being in med school and what that's like. And for anybody out there that's listening to this and are thinking you are too old, you are not too old. I don't care if you're already in your 50s and you start to start your prereqs, because think of how old we're going to get, okay? You see people on social media, my grandma celebrating her 110th birthday. I have patients in their 90s that look like they're 70, okay?
Hmm.
That I mean, it's crazy because we have been conditioned to think that being in your 60s is old age, right? It's not. I have people, 60s, 70s, 80s that are still out there. So if you're, 55, let's say 55, 65, 75, 85, you have at least 30 more years, right? Now
Wow.
go backwards, like, from 25 to 55, that whole period, you're still have that left. So,
Yeah.
think about how you want to spend the rest of your life. And if you want to make a change, just do it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, how does your mediumship play
Mhm.
into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it always plays in. So it's really fascinating because when I graduated from med school, I was 58, and that was in 2016. 10 years, I'm 68.
Mhm.
So when I graduated, I had a whole business plan. I never thought that I was going to do the work that I'm doing today. I had a whole business plan. I was going to be director of my medical center. I was going to open 3 medical centers, and I had this whole business plan coming from the business world, right? And I knew exactly what I was going to do. And as soon as I graduated, I met this woman. I was waiting for my license. I had taken my boards. I was waiting for my license, and I went to study craniosacral therapy with the Upledger Institute. And I met this woman, and we had dinner, and she said, "Oh, I didn't know anything about her." She said, "I'm a medium, by the way." And she was like an executive kind of person, so I did not expect her to say that. And somebody's here who wants to talk to you. And literally, even though I had heard the spirit world for, 25 years by now, that somebody else could give me a message from one of my relatives, I was very skeptical. So it's really funny. So this is only in 2016. And she said, "Oh, we figured out right away it's my mom because she's talking about laying fish nets in the ocean and rowing the boat. I mean, you can't even make this up." So I knew that this was true. She was actually talking to my mom. And she said, "You have to go study mediumship at Arthur Findlay College in England." So 6 months later, I was at Arthur Findlay College, and then, went 5 times in like 2 years or something, back and forth. Because every time I went there, the spirit world was like, "You have to come back in 6 months. You have to come back." And it's like a hurry, and now I can see it very clearly because I had to step into this role by 2019. And so in 2019, it was the first time I worked as a professional medium at a spiritual conference and started teaching mediumship classes. And then that became more integrated into being a medical intuitive or a medical medium. And even that started happening when I was in med school. I would see my patients in a meditation and then be assigned to that patient the next day that I've never
Wow.
seen or met, and already knowing what that person had experienced or traumatic events. And it's really interesting because it's been a lot of like traumatic patients that have trauma history, which then guided me to that ancestral healing. But so what happened as soon as I graduated, I would get patients as soon as new patients. They walk through the door, and the spirit world would say lung cancer. I'm like, lung cancer? This person is coming in for allergies, and then sure enough, it would be lung cancer, right? Just following through and jumping through the extra hoops. So what I have learned, right? So when I hear the spirit world, I'm always going to take that into account, right? So for this patient, I would then say, you know, it's probably allergies because there's a lot of allergies going around right now, but we're going to do an X-ray just to make sure, right? If you're up for that, and sure enough, it comes back lung cancer. So because when the spirit world speaks, I know to listen, but it's the same now. So what has happened is I've actually left being in the clinic, so I don't work in the clinic anymore. I only work intuitively as a medical medium with people like around the world, and it's absolutely fascinating because sometimes I will just get the diagnosis, like we'll be talking about something, tell me about your allergies, or tell me why you scheduled this, and then the spirit world says, "Oh, I get a specific diagnosis." And they haven't even said anything that goes along with this diagnosis yet, right? And I said, "This is the diagnosis I hear. Do you have any of these symptoms?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah." Or I even had surgery for that. I'm like, "Okay, well there it is." But this is still a problem because I keep hearing it. They keep saying this diagnosis. So now it has just been this integration of mediumship, right? Working with the spirit world and working intuitively. So if I work as a medium, if I'm doing, connecting with the departed loved one in the spirit world, and I'm doing a mediumship reading, sometimes I will feel it. So I've had instances when I said, your mom, did she have ovarian cancer? Because I get the pain in my ovaries. Or I'll say, "Oh, did this person have," like I'll see like a hospital, I'll see a lot of IVs, and then I'll get a pain in my left breast, and I'll say, did your, wife have breast cancer? And they go, "Yes, yeah, she had breast cancer." And I said it was worse on her left breast or started in the left breast because I feel the pain. And then I feel the pain move to the right. So I was like, and then it spread to the right. And so it's really interesting how
Wow.
the information comes through, right? So I understand now why it was I had to go to medical school, because I'm supposed to help people find the right treatment. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. And it's really fascinating because I've worked with people. Once I worked with somebody in Romania, and it was about their child. And anyway, I said, uh, your child has this, and I happen to know the one doctor in Romania that can help you. Like I had just learned, it's fascinating. Like I'll
Wow.
hear about that doctor, and then like it's almost like a joke now. Who needs this person? Because I'm getting the information now, and then like a few days or a week goes by, and there is the person who needed that. And it's like we are so divinely guided because working like this every day and working with people around the world, I can see how guided we all are. And people tell me, I before I went to bed last night, I said, I need somebody who can help me with this problem, right? It doesn't matter if it's ancestral healing or if it's, a medical thing. And then they said, and then I woke up at 2 and I turned on my computer and I said, I'm going to watch something on YouTube. And then you popped up. And then I listened to you and now I'm here, right? I mean, it's so, I mean, we're
Wow.
all so guided, and it's like,
Yes.
we feel that tap on the shoulder kind of, and then we get guided, like, I don't know, I'm just going to schedule a session, right? And then there's something, and it happens all the time. It doesn't matter if it's ancestral healing, medical intuitive, or I do a session called Messages from Spirit Guides. I'm going to say it's probably the most fun session, where I sketch quickly what I see. And I learned, this is what something I learned during the pandemic. I wanted to go to Arthur Findlay College, but it was never the right time. And I have never been able to draw anything in my whole life. I've always drawn stick figures, could not draw for my life. Took a course and we just followed along. And as the teacher is drawing the portrait of what she's seeing, like it just looks like an egg. I already see the face. So I already know what that was going to come. And then the face comes out as she's drawing it. And we're like going along on our little pad trying to do what she's doing. And then she goes, that's it. I'm going to put you in groups now. And I'm like, I can't draw. Like, how am I supposed to do this? And sure enough, faces come out and it's fascinating. I learned to draw literally in an hour, and I've never been able to draw in my whole life. So this is like the spirit world that all of a sudden allows you to do something. It's like, um, I played the piano as a child. My ex-husband played the guitar. Always wanted to know how to play the guitar. In 1 week, after my near death experience, I knew how to play the guitar. And then we had friends over and we were playing together. And all our friends were saying, wow, I didn't know you know how to play the guitar. And I just knew a couple of songs, right? It's not like a big deal. And they're like, I didn't know you played the guitar. Oh my gosh, like how many years have you been playing? And I'm like, I learned last weekend, right? So it's just weird because all of a sudden that skill is there. And I've seen it to many people that have gone to Arthur Findlay College. My best friend that I grew up with, she's a nurse and she also became a medium, but her path was to be an artist. In like 2 years, she went from never having drawn a thing to having exhibitions, like people come and buy her paintings, okay? In two
Wow.
years. I mean, it's crazy. The thing is, we are all that good at something, okay? Everybody incarnated for a purpose. Now she worked as a nurse. She's in her early 60s, right? Her whole life she's been a nurse. But now it's time to step into this other phase of life. And once she retires from nursing, she's just going to be painting for the rest of her life. So sometimes we don't get to find out our gifts, just like I didn't get to find out my gifts until really I graduated from med school when I was 58, which was my Saturn return. And all of a sudden, my life took a 180-degree turn. And all of a sudden, I was thrown into mediumship and working spiritually with people. And now I understand why I needed the degree, because it's that integration of being a medium and working with people and helping people. But the messages from spirit guides, when I draw the face, I once had a client. I think he was in his 70s, and he had a monk. So I drew this monk, and I held up the picture. And I always take a picture and email it to the people too, so they have a picture of it. And it's just a super quick sketch. It takes 5 minutes or less, just so they can see what I see, right?
Mhm.
And I showed him the picture, and he said, "Yeah, I know this monk. I met him. I met him. I had a near-death experience when I was in my 30s, and I met that monk, and I know he's my guide." So,
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
it's fascinating, and it just gives you. I mean, I still love to get confirmations on things because I'm still so scientific. So I love when the spirit world can confirm these things. And once I drew a picture of this man. He had this big, burly black beard, and this is the one time I had a relative or somebody we know show up. It was her husband. He had died in a car accident the year earlier, and she goes, "That's my husband. You just drew my husband." And she got his driver's license and held it up for me, and it was the exact copy of what his picture on his driver's license looked like. So,
Wow.
sometimes it could be a relative that is your guide that's coming up, but we have a team of guides. So, but the one I typically get is like the main guide. But I'm gonna say her husband was her main guide at that time. So. But it's
Wow.
fascinating, right? We're
That
all
is
guided, you
fascinating.
know?
Oh my
Hmm.
goodness. Well, this has just been
Hmm.
amazing. I've loved talking to you so much. Please tell everybody how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so the best way to connect is just to go to my website, which is Dr. Lotte. So DR for doctor, DRLOTTE, drlotte.com. And I'm going to say, you can either book a session there. You can see all the different sessions I do: ancestral healing, medical intuitive, messages from spirit guides, mediumship, wholehearted, which is kind of like a little bit of everything except mediumship. Um, and you can just book a session there. And if you're not ready to book yet, please sign up for the email, because that's how, we announce different things, like I'm going to be teaching a class, or I teach for the Shift Network, I teach for the Theosophical Society, and other places. So that's the best way of staying up to date, is to sign up for the email.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today and coming on Soul Elevation. It's really been a joy to talk to you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you and being a guest on your show.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Soul Elevation. If someone in your life would be inspired or uplifted by what you heard today, please take a moment to share it with them. These are the kinds of conversations that ripple out and elevate collective consciousness. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the powerful episodes ahead. Your presence, energy, and support truly help amplify this mission of raising frequency and anchoring in a more awakened humanity. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.